Fugijia set a goal for himself at 15 to become the strongest martial artist. Since then, he trained and sparred non-stop, gathering a group of loyal brothers in arms. At 18, he established the famous Muya Gang, rising quickly through the martial world. But as our protagonist gradually got closer to his goal, a new problem began to trouble him. He started losing his hair. Although he was the key figure of the gang, people often mistook him for a supporting character. Soon after, an older man had just been defeated by Fugijia, surprised that the Muya Gang possessed such overwhelming skill. He could hardly accept that Fugijia, whom he thought was just an ordinary member, had overpowered him. Fugijia, already used to such misunderstandings, calmly corrected him. He was the true gang master. After a brief pause, the older man sighed that he could now rest without regrets. Fugijia responded that he had no intention of hurting him further. Later that day, the three Liang brothers sought to join the Muya Gang. They pledged loyalty to follow the gang master, but mistakenly paid respects to the wrong person. The second master gently corrected them, explaining that he wasn't the gang master. Following that incident, a man shouted angrily that the Muya Gang was being disrespectful, saying his master from the Jonyi villa had personally come to discuss an alliance, yet their leader didn't appear. He questioned their manners while glaring at Fugijia. After a moment, the young man recognized him, quickly apologizing for the misunderstanding. Whispering to his master, he then excused himself, saying his master wasn't feeling well and that they'd continue the discussion another time. After these events, Fugijia called the second master, saying something was weighing on his mind. The second master assured him that he could share anything. Fugijia then asked if his hair loss affected how others perceived him. The second master righteously replied that judging people by appearances is shallow. Fugijia smiled gratefully, but just as the atmosphere softened, a servant interrupted to announce the arrival of the second master's hairstylist. As the second master left, he complained about his split ends from the dry weather. Fugijia's smile faded as he blankly watched him go. Later that day, a servant hurriedly reported that Fugijia had left. The second master immediately asked if he had left a message, but the servant said no. Determined, the second master ordered the servant to find every doctor who might have a remedy for hair restoration. The servant quickly set out to do so. Meanwhile, our protagonist traveled far and wide, seeking skilled doctors and continuing his training. Along the way, he met a woman who specialized in transformation techniques. Fugijia hoped she could help him with his hair problem. Surprised to meet the renowned leader of the Muya Gang, she greeted him respectfully and asked his name and age. She explained that his situation wasn't too complicated and opened a small box, saying that, while there's no permanent cure for hair loss, his case was manageable. Holding a thin brush and a razor-like tool, she told him he needed to adjust his appearance. Fugijia wondered if it could really work. A year later, Fugijia reflected on how long he had been away from the gang. He anticipated his return, wondering how everyone would react to his new look. Troubled thoughts filled his mind, but he shook them off and continued his journey. When he finally returned, the entire gang happily welcomed him back. To his surprise, they had all shaved their heads. Calling them silly for copying him, he laughed emotionally and removed his wig, proudly announcing his return. Next, Fugijia sits across from the master of transformation, recounting how the second master, Lin Tang, once famous for his unmatched sword technique, was known throughout the martial world as the graceful silver moon. However, ever since he shaved his head alongside Fugijia, people began calling him by a new title, the Shaolin Shaver. The transformation master listens quietly, commenting that people in the martial world can be pretty unpredictable. Fugijia agrees. The master remarks that titles are just names and shouldn't bother anyone, mentioning how the Emperor of the Western Mountain once called himself the ancestor of the West Mountain after growing older. Fugijia laughs, saying he also thought he wouldn't mind if people called him Smoothhead Jia. The transformation master gently points out that Fugijia has truly lost all his hair. Fugijia continues his story. One day, Lin Tang was confronted by two warriors searching for the graceful silver moon. Lin Tang confidently declared that he was indeed the same person. Surprised, the two began whispering that he had joined a monastery. Realizing the misunderstanding, Lin Tang tried to explain, but before he could, the two challenged him to a duel. In a flash of movement, their hair was sliced away by his swift technique. Fugijia explains to the transformation master that ever since then, more people have ended up hairless because of Lin Tang's quick sword, which is why people jokingly call him the Shaolin Shaver. The transformation master is left speechless. Fugijia adds that even though Lin Tang never complains, he must secretly dislike that nickname. He feels responsible for involving his companions in such trouble. When the transformation master asks what Fugijia truly seeks, he explains that he no longer worries about himself. His brothers were not naturally hairless like him. He hopes to find a special cure that could help them restore their hair. Sadly, the transformation master admits she doesn't possess such a remedy, but mentions rumors of someone who has developed a method to speed up hair growth. Eagerly, Fugijia asks, "Who is this person?" She reveals that Master Jineng from the Shaolin Temple is said to hold this secret formula. In the next scene, a warrior reports to his master, Dongliang Pi. His master asks how his encounter with the Muya gang went. The warrior admits that he was defeated, removing his hat, which turns out to be a wig, revealing his newly shaved head. Sitting in a tavern surrounded by other hairless men, Dongliang Pi sighs and calls him foolish, saying that if everyone decided to live like monks after losing a match, the world would be full of them. The warrior quickly explains that it isn't by choice. It's the strange doing of the Muya gang. He had heard that the members of the Muya gang shave their heads as part of their discipline. The warrior hurriedly corrects him, saying Dongliang Pi has been deceived. Their hairless look is just a disguise, and they're still the same fierce fighters as before. Determined to restore balance, Dongliang Pi decides to confront the Muya gang himself. The warrior warns him to be cautious, saying rumors describe the Muya leader as an unstoppable force. Dongliang Pi scoffs, calling it nonsense. Meanwhile, at the Muya gang's base, Lin Tang reports to Fugijia about the state of the group during his absence. Although they've accepted recruits who sought a more disciplined lifestyle, the gang is still smaller than before. Fugijia sighs, realizing how much Lin Tang has endured while he was away. Just then, a servant rushes in to announce that the leader of the Great Staff Sect has arrived seeking a formal challenge. Curious, Fugijia asks who this man is. Lin Tang explains that Dongliang Pi is a remarkable martial artist. He's also known for his unusual endurance, once consuming 60 raw peppers without any other food. Lin Tang believes Dongliang Pi must be extraordinary, but Fugijia remains unconvinced. Soon after, Fugijia, Lin Tang, and several Muya gang members meet Dongliang Pi. Seeing the hairless group, Dongliang Pi jokes that he has friends in the Shaolin sect and promises to go easy on them for old time's sake. The Muya gang remains silent, and Dongliang Pi begins to suspect the rumors about their mysterious master are true. Fugijia calmly breaks the silence, asking whether Dongliang Pi knows Master Jineng from the Shaolin Temple. Dongliang Pi scoffs, asking if Fugijia thinks this is a comedy, then suddenly moves into a defensive stance and strikes Lin Tang lightly on the neck. Startled and rubbing his neck, Lin Tang quickly clarifies that he isn't the gangmaster. Back at the tavern, the same warrior from earlier finds himself surrounded by determined, hairless martial artists. Nervously, he asks what they want. They ask him one question where he bought his hat. Continuing, Dongliang Pi prepares to unleash his signature technique, the 36 Shadow Staff. Mid-move, he pauses to confirm whether Fugijia is truly the leader of the Muya gang. Fugijia calmly nods. As Dongliang Pi studies his opponent, he remarks on how well Fugijia has concealed his real strength beneath his calm and modest appearance. Believing that someone of his build would be slowed by size, Dongliang Pi relies on speed to gain the upper hand, but to his surprise, he is swiftly outmatched. Realizing his mistake, he admits to himself that he underestimated Fugijia by judging him on appearance alone. Hours later, Lin Tang informs Dongliang Pi that a new policy requires a contribution of 10 tals before visitors can leave. Dongliang Pi, slightly taken aback, asks if the gang has been struggling financially. Lin Tang admits their budget is tight. Dongliang Pi nods in understanding, saying that martial artists devote themselves to discipline, training, and protecting others, leaving little time to secure income. He adds that it's no wonder people often question how fighters sustain their livelihoods. Dongliang Pi then claims to have discovered the perfect solution: investment. Intrigued, Fugijia and Lin Tang ask him to elaborate. Dongliang Pi explains that during last year's Central Plains Martial Arts Congress, he met a man named Enhoa Park from Suzhou. They became fast friends, and soon Enhoa Park revealed that he was the descendant of a former royal family. Dongliang Pi recalls feeling that there was something extraordinary about him. Enhoa Park confided that his ancestors had left behind hidden treasures worth 3 million taels. However, he had exhausted his own funds and asked Dongliang Pi to lend him 200 taels as starting capital, promising to share half the treasure once found. Astonished, Fugijia and Lin Tang ask if Dongliang Pi actually gave him the money. Chuckling, Dongliang Pi replies that he's not that gullible. Of course, he didn't. The two exhale in relief. But as he continues, Dongliang Pi explains that he found the treasure plan too small-minded. Instead, he suggested that Enhoa Park aim higher if he was destined for greatness. Why not restore the glory of his ancestors and rebuild the old dynasty? Inspired by this vision, he invested all his savings to support Enhoa Park's cause. Later, Fugijia and Dongliang Pi stand face to face near the edge of a cliff. Fugijia breaks the silence, saying he needs to step aside for a brief moment. Dongliang Pi nods, assuming his opponent is just nervous about facing the 36 Shadow Staff. Fugijia explains that he's had too much water because of the heat and isn't backing out of their match. Dongliang Pi agrees to wait. As Fugijia prepares to excuse himself, Lin Tang suddenly stops him, asking what else they really have left to do besides competing with one another. He laments that their lives have become repetitive and predictable. Fugijia, clearly uncomfortable, admits he didn't know Lin Tang was pondering such deep topics, but insists the timing isn't ideal. Lin Tang tells him not to focus on trivial things, and points out that the cliff they're standing on is where their dreams first began. He reminisces about being only 14 that year, when they both vowed to become heroes. Trying to hold his composure, Fugijia interrupts, saying they can talk later. However, Lin Tang continues, reflecting on how they once stood at the pinnacle of the martial world. Fugijia can barely stand still any longer. Lin Tang shouts for him not to give up just yet. Watching the entire exchange, Dongliang Pi grows impatient, telling Lin Tang not to interrupt someone in the middle of something urgent. Lin Tang blocks Dongliang Pi's staff with a swift motion, warning him to watch his words, or he'll trim his hairline even further. Irritated, Dongliang Pi pushes back, and Lin Tang accidentally bumps into Fugijia, sending him tumbling over the cliff's edge. Fugijia suddenly wakes up, realizing it was all just a dream. Relieved, he hurries to the washroom. Upon entering, he meets Lin Tang, who greets him casually. Fugijia thanks him warmly, thinking to himself how grateful he is that his friend stopped him from making the same mistake, even in his sleep. Years later, Lin Tang and Fugijia are seen walking along a quiet forest path. Fugijia notices that Lin Tang's hair has finally grown back and compliments him. With a tired smile, he adds that, for some reason, he's been feeling the urge to retire lately. He suddenly wakes up from another restless dream. Lin Tang tells him that he woke up just in time. They've arrived at the Shaolin Temple. As planned, they came to visit in hopes of meeting the famous Master Jineng. The chief monk greets them and apologizes, explaining that Senior Jineng is currently away on a journey and will not return for some time. Curious, the chief monk asks if Fugijia is truly the leader of the Muye gang. When Fugijia confirms, the monk smiles and explains that Master Jineng predicted his visit long ago. He even left a message saying that Fugijia would come to seek the temple's treasures, urging them to offer it to him. Fugijia politely declines. The chief monk wonders aloud if the great master's foresight could have been mistaken, calling it unfortunate since their temple's founder blessed those treasures. He then asks what Fugijia has truly come for. Looking embarrassed, Fugijia hesitated, prompting the monk to guess that perhaps he wished to learn one of their famous Shaolin endurance techniques. Fugijia shakes his head and finally admits that he came seeking the legendary hair growth formula. The chief monk chuckles, explaining that it's a delicate matter since that formula is one of their most carefully guarded research achievements. However, he recalls that Master Jineng mentioned a possible exchange for a small mission that could be completed in return for the remedy. Later, Fugijia recounts the entire discussion to Lin Tang, explaining the offer from the temple. Lin Tang asks whether they should accept it. Fugijia mentions that the monks claim to have over 40 different hair growth solutions. Upon hearing this, Lin Tang jokingly suggests that they cut their hair again and continue the journey immediately, but Fugijia firmly refuses. As the two masters continue on their quest, Lin Tang reassures him that as long as there's hope, it's worth trying. He tells Fugijia not to worry if all else fails and Fugijia can't restore his hair, then he'll make sure no one else keeps theirs either. Fugijia laughs and tells him to stop with the ridiculous talk as they head further down the road. Earlier at the Shaolin Temple, the chief monk explains to Fugijia that their sect has several disciples working undercover within a mysterious organization. Pausing, the chief monk asks if Fugijia has any questions about this group. However, Fugijia seems far more curious about the undercover agents themselves. When he learns that the famous hair restoration formula accurately originates from that very organization, his interest deepens. The chief monk confirms this, explaining that to blend in successfully, an undercover agent must have a completely convincing disguise down to the smallest detail. Hair, he says, is often the key, as many martial artists are recognized by their distinctive hairstyles. Fugijia nods in agreement. The monk then asks if Fugijia has heard of the great conflict that took place across the Central Plains 30 years ago. Fugijia, surprised, replies that he's only 26 years old. How could he possibly know about that? The chief monk pauses, looking shocked, and asks if Fugijia himself is in disguise. Fugijia assures him that he isn't. The monk chuckles and continues, telling him the story of the martial world. It is divided into two main sides, one representing traditional order and discipline, and the other pursuing forbidden or chaotic arts. Fugijia comments that the alliance of traditional arts preservation sounds noble and just. The monk agrees but adds that there are many gray areas, one of which includes the Muye gang itself. To curb the rise of these unorthodox groups, the Shaolin Temple set an example 3 years ago. They carefully selected a dozen skilled monks to infiltrate various branches of those organizations. After years of effort, many of these branches were transformed into peaceful places of study and reflection. However, one mission went wrong, and an undercover monk stationed in the Heiluo Hall, a branch led entirely by women, was discovered. The Shaolin Temple believes he is now in danger and asks Fugijia to carry out a rescue. Fugijaya agrees, saying that if it's just a rescue, it should be simple enough, but wonders if he must disguise himself as a Shaolin disciple. The chief monk reassures him that no disguise is needed. He should avoid mentioning the Muye gang. Curious, Fugijaya asks why the temple doesn't handle the mission itself. The monk awkwardly explains that the Heiluo Hall is a women-only sect, and it wouldn't be appropriate for the temple's monks to intervene directly. Later that day, Fugijaya briefs Lin Tang about their new assignment from the Shaolin Temple. As he reflects, he suddenly realizes he forgot to ask a crucial question. How did a monk manage to stay undercover in an all-female sect for 3 years? Lin Tang then asks where the Heiluo Hall is located. Fugijaya pauses, face-palming. He forgot to ask that too. The chief monk had also invited Fugijaya to join the Alliance for the Preservation of Traditional Arts, with a 20% discount for new members. Fugijaya politely declined, saying he preferred to remain independent. Next, we're introduced to the leader of one of the unorthodox sect's branches, a man named Curly. He's conducting routine health checkups for everyone in his division to ensure that no one is suffering from illness or fatigue. He proudly calls it an annual tradition of social responsibility that every responsible leader should undertake. As Curly examines one of his subordinates, he's asked why he's personally handling such work instead of hiring a doctor. Curly smiles and explains that before joining the sect, he was once a renowned physician known as the Hand of Heaven. After reviewing his notes, Curly concludes that the subordinate's overall condition is fine, though he's facing some minor health imbalances. The man seems doubtful, but Curly calmly explains that this is part of Eastern medical philosophy and not easily understood by outsiders. He asks whether the subordinate has been feeling restless, distracted, or unable to sleep. The man admits that his daily routine is fine, but lately he has felt distanced from his personal goals. Curly asks what his goal is. Embarrassed, the subordinate confesses that he hopes to stop living alone, find someone special, and become the ideal couple of the marital world, and someday, he'd like to have a daughter. Curly laughs warmly, saying that such concerns are common among those who train in the martial arts. He prescribes a simple lifestyle guide: drink more water, exercise regularly, get proper rest, avoid staying up all night, and eat more vegetables while cutting out unhealthy habits. The subordinate looks doubtful, wondering if this really applies to martial artists. But before he can finish, chaos suddenly breaks out. Fugijaya and Lin Tang burst into the hall. The entire group jumps to attention, ready to defend themselves. Curly narrows his eyes, remarking that no one has ever dared barge into their branch so boldly before. He observes the two intruders. One appears to be a middle-aged monk from Shaolin, the other a calm yet powerful young man. Curious, Curly asks if they genuinely intend to challenge him, boasting that all his members are present today. As the tension rises, Lin Tang steps forward faster than expected, demonstrating his incredible speed. In an instant, Curly finds his hair undone by Lin Tang's swift technique. His startled subordinates recognize the move, flash in the pan. Realization spreads. The mysterious visitor is none other than Lin Tang, known in martial circles as the Shaolin Shaver. They also notice that Lin Tang himself now has hair again, sparking speculation about the numerous rumors surrounding him. Seeing the situation, Curly immediately changes his tone, realizing that Lin Tang is a well-known figure. He apologizes sincerely for not recognizing him earlier and introduces himself properly as Curly, leader of the Jie Shi Hall of the unorthodox sect. He then asks why they've come. Fugijaya replies that they're looking for directions to the Heiluo Hall. Hearing this, Curly quickly kneels in respect and says they should have mentioned it earlier. He would have gladly helped from the start. Continuing, Curly, now serving as their guide, warns Fugijaya that they might be in danger and asks if they truly understand who he is. Fugijaya replies that Curly is the leader of the Jie Shi Hall. Curly chuckles, saying that being the hall leader is only one of his many titles. He proudly reveals his true identity. He's known as the Hand of Heaven, a respected physician and counselor. Fugijaya raises a brow in curiosity. Curly explains that he's actually a well-known therapist in the martial world, helping those who struggle under constant pressure. Through his sessions, many have regained balance in their lives and even become his friends. Confidently, he declares that these same people would surely come to rescue him if he were ever in trouble. He then smirks and asks Fugijaya if he's afraid. Fugijaya ignores the question and instead asks if Curly can evaluate him as well. Curly agrees and instructs him to stick out his tongue for diagnosis. Back at the Jie Shi Hall, Curly's disciples have rushed to seek help from Brother Tianba, a towering, broad-shouldered man. They tell him their master has been taken away. Tianba slams his fist into his palm, demanding to know who would dare do such a thing. When the disciple suggests that it might be people from the Shaolin sect, Tianba's eyes widen in disbelief, astonished that anyone would have the nerve to confront Sir Curly. The story then shifts to a few months earlier. At that time, Brother Tianba had visited Sir Curly for advice, pretending it was for a friend whose partner had left him for a scholar. Curly calmly asks if this friend is actually Tianba himself, Embarrassed, Tianba admits it's true his partner left him, and he's been struggling to move on. Curly patiently comforts him, saying that feeling sad is a natural part of being human. He reminds Tianba that affection can't be forced, and that real strength lies in knowing when to let go. Encouraged but still curious, Tianba asks how he can improve himself. Curly leans forward and asks if he knows what truly separates him from a scholar. Tianba proudly replies that he's already done his research and found that scholars are refined, handsome men known in their towns. Curly sighs and corrects him, saying that what truly sets them apart is knowledge. Martial artists often focus only on physical strength, forgetting that wisdom is what earns respect. That's why, he explains, the martial world is sometimes seen as impulsive rather than disciplined. Realizing his mistake, Tianba nods, saying he understands now. Curly tells him that if he wants to be respected, he must overcome his weaknesses through learning and reflection. Inspired, Tianba takes his words to heart and later decides to apply for the imperial examinations to broaden his knowledge. Back in the present, Tianba stands up from his seat and tells Curly's disciples that because their master once guided him during his lowest moment, he'll now repay the kindness by helping to rescue him. With his teacher's permission, Tianba sets out with determination. Later that day, Brother Tianba reports the situation to the local authorities. Alongside the disciples of the Jie Shi Hall, he provides detailed descriptions of the individuals involved. After taking notes, the county official assures them that the matter will be investigated and asks them to return for further updates. Tianba, impatient, asks how long it might take. The official apologizes, explaining that their team is short-staffed and needs time to gather more help, so it may take a while. Feeling disappointed, Tianba mutters that officials seem to collect taxes rather than help the people. Later, Tianba and the Jie Shi Hall disciples gather at a nearby tavern. The disciples cheer for Brother Tianba, praising his ability to deal calmly with officials. Tianba nods, saying that martial artists must earn the respect of others through their actions, not just strength. The disciples raise their drinks in celebration, but Tianba politely declines, saying he has to study later that night. He admits that he used to be quiet and reserved, which comes as a surprise to everyone. They recall how Sir Curly once told them that Tianba had single-handedly resolved countless conflicts in the martial world, calling him a role model for their generation. Tianba laughs, explaining that being calm doesn't mean being weak. In fact, those who let their actions speak often talk less. He adds that Sir Curly once taught him that communication is an art form, and that lesson helped him overcome his own shyness. He thanks Sir Curly for changing his outlook. The disciples nod in agreement, hoping that the local officials will be quicker in resolving the case. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the road, our protagonists, Fugijia, Lin Tang, and Sir Curly, are stopped by three men who block their path. The leader claims that the forest trail belongs to them and requests a small toll to pass. Lin Tang calmly asks the price, and the leader replies, "Just 15 coins." After paying, they're allowed to go on their way. The men cheer, delighted with their honest earnings, remarking that this feels far better than their old reckless lifestyle. Their boss agrees, saying it's thanks to Sir Curly's teachings about turning one's life around. One of them glances toward the departing carriage, swearing he saw someone who looked just like Sir Curly. The boss laughs it off, saying that it can't be true. Sir Curly is known for his distinctive curly hair, while the men in that carriage were all hairless. Inside the carriage, Fugijia jokes that he thought those men were coming to rescue Curly. Curly admits he thought so too, but reassures Fugijia not to worry, his friends will surely come. He proudly speaks of Tianba, describing him as a martial artist capable of handling dozens of opponents on his own. Fugijia raises an eyebrow, asking why Curly places his hope in people outside his own group. Curly sighs, explaining that his old organization isn't as unified as it was before their leader went into seclusion, and most branches now operate independently. Some have even reformed into peaceful communities, so he can't rely on them anymore. Still, he insists that his martial arts friends, especially Tianba, will definitely come to save him. Just then, Fugijia interrupts, smiling and telling him they've arrived at Heiluo. They thank Curly for guiding them and prepare to part ways. Curly hesitates, asking if they could wait a little longer. He's certain his rescue will arrive any moment. Fugijia apologizes, explaining that they're in a hurry and must continue. Meanwhile, back in town, Tianba finishes his meal and bids farewell to the Jie Shi Hall disciples. He says he has to return home to complete his studies, but has already paid his share of the bill. The disciples wave him off, once again saying that Brother Tianba truly is their role model. In the next scene, inside the Heiluo hall of an unorthodox sect, its leader, Sister Chungkwai, sits before a captured disciple. Calmly, she asks whether he has any last words. The man, named Kuiping, finally confesses that he is actually an undercover member from the Shaolin Temple who has been posing as a woman for the past 3 years. Surprised, Chungkwai questions his claim, pointing out that he doesn't have the usual shaved head of a monk. Kuiping quickly explains that he used their temple's secret hair restoration technique and pleads not to be judged for his posture. Chung-kui shakes her head, calling him shameless for deceiving the entire hall. She reminds him that he was even chosen as their saintess, receiving votes from every sister in the hall. Kuping bows his head, apologizing for betraying their trust. He only wants to know how they discovered his secret. Was there something wrong with his disguise? Chung-kui replies by reminding him of a night long ago when the two of them stood together watching the moon. That evening, they had stood side by side on a quiet bridge. Chung-kui complained about how people often gave her unfair nicknames, calling her Little Li Kui because of her dark complexion. Kuping reassured her, saying names don't matter. Reacting to them only means falling into someone's trap. He told her that her skin tone was not a flaw but a distinctive charm. Touched, Chung-kui called him thoughtful as always. Chung-kui thanked her, joking that if Kuping were a man, she would have already married such a dependable woman. Kuping blushed, replying that her only goal was to become as strong and confident as Chung-kui. Back in the present, Kuping still doesn't understand what gave him away. The hall leader explains that his disguise was nearly perfect, but on that summer night, while they talked for hours, mosquitoes bit her while he wasn't touched at all. She later realized he must have unconsciously activated the Shaolin protective technique he had mastered. From that moment, she began to watch him closely. She then reveals the final clue to his nickname among the sisters, the Overtime Wolf, due to his exceptional work ethic and punctuality. Every woman in the hall would take a few personal days each month, but he never did, which eventually exposed his secret. Sighing, Chung-kui picks up a ceremonial blade and walks toward him, saying she doesn't wish to prolong the situation any further. Kuping, knowing there's nothing left to say, tells her one last thing. He's also from Henan. Chung-kui pauses, calls him a fool, and instead of harming him, uses the blade to cut the ropes binding his hands. She tells him that a monk is waiting outside for him and advises him to leave quickly. Deeply moved by her unexpected mercy, Kuping steps outside and meets the monk, Fugijia, greeting him as a brother before they quietly leave together. Meanwhile, our protagonists prepare a gift for the leader of the Heiluo Hall. Fugijia had done his research and discovered that Sister Chung-kui was famously nicknamed Little Li Kui. Wanting to make a good impression, he presents a giant decorative axe as a gift. Lin Tang laughs, praising Fugijia for being so observant and thoughtful. Continuing, on the morning of September 6th, the unorthodox sect known as Heiluo Hall held a grand welcoming ceremony at Shimen. The leader, Sister Chung-kui, personally hosted the event in honor of Muya Gang's master, Fugijia, who had come on an official visit. Also present were Kuiping, the hall's saintess, Curly, the leader of Jie-shi Hall, and Lin Tang, the second master of the Muya Gang. After the ceremony, Chung-kui and Fugijia held a private meeting in the Juxian room. Chung-kui proposed that both sects strengthen their friendship through shared martial practice and open cooperation. Fugijia gladly agreed. The two leaders discussed the state of the martial world and eventually reached an understanding regarding the Shaolin Temple's former undercover agent. In the end, they both decided to establish an alliance built on mutual respect and progress, agreeing that achieving great things was the duty of their generation. The meeting concluded with warm applause before everyone proceeded to the dining hall. As they sat down for the banquet, Fugijia turned to Kuiping, asking if he had plans to return to the Shaolin Temple. Kuiping smiled, saying that he had grown attached to his life at Heiluo Hall and wanted to help rebuild the sect. Besides, after living so long in disguise, his hair had grown out again, making it hard to go back to his old identity. Fugijia laughed, joking that he wished he had such problems himself. While enjoying the food, Fugijia noticed something unusual about the hot pot in front of them. Curly proudly explained that it was a special creation designed by their sect. Many people argued over how spicy the broth should be, so they invented a divided pot split into 4 sections: clear, mild, medium, and extra spicy, so everyone could enjoy their preferred flavor. Fugijia and Lin Tang were amazed at the creativity, calling it both thoughtful and practical. Fugijia then asked, half-jokingly, what happens if someone sitting in front of a spicy section doesn't actually enjoy spicy food? Curly laughed, praising him for his observation, and pointed to the upper part of the table. He revealed that the table was rotatable, allowing guests to swap sections to find their ideal flavor easily. Impressed, Fugijia declared that their innovation was genuinely inspiring. Chung-kui added that thanks to this clever design, they had opened several successful hot pot restaurants across the region, which had become a significant source of funding for their group's revival. Curly nodded proudly, saying that their creative spirit gave them a strong foundation for the future. Fugijia smiled, realizing that as long as people dare to innovate, success will always follow, and that this journey had taught him something valuable about leadership. Meanwhile, Kuping quietly glanced toward Curly, reflecting on the first group of undercover disciples once sent to his hall long ago. Some of them had chosen different paths over time, but when it came to creativity and progress, Kuping admitted that Shaolin had fallen behind. Just then, Cupping noticed that the pork belly he had placed in his section of the hot pot had mysteriously disappeared. Turning his gaze toward Fugijia and Lin Tang, both quietly eating, he sighed in disbelief and muttered to himself, wondering what the point of the rotating design even was. Continuing this long and eventful journey in search of a legendary hair growth formula, filled with challenges, friendship, and lessons, finally reaches its conclusion. Cuping, looking apologetic, tells Fugijia that he still doesn't have the formula. Fugijia smiles, thanking him for the effort and wishing him well. As he leaves, Fugijia recalls his mission from the Shaolin Temple to retrieve the missing disciple in exchange for the formula. It's clear that he has failed that task, but he reminds himself that in the martial world, people must follow their own paths. He resolves to try harder next time. Then he notices Curly still sitting in their carriage and asks why he hasn't returned to his hall. Curly explains that Sister Chunkue asked him to thank Fugijia. Personally, she truly loved the gifts he brought. She also sent him a comb as a token of appreciation, asking that he accept it. Fugijia laughs, saying they won't be passing near Jieshi Hall anytime soon, but Curly insists that he's free to travel anywhere and would gladly accompany them as a partner. Earlier that day, Sister Chunkwai had called Curly for a private conversation. She teased him about his new hairstyle, saying it made him look too similar to Fugijia. When Curly asked what she wanted to discuss, she revealed that 2 other halls, Qinqing and Tai Bai, had been searching for him. Surprised, Curly asked why. Chunkwei explained that since their organization was rebuilding, they had begun reviewing those who once caused turmoil within the sect. Unfortunately, Curly's name had risen to the top of their list. Puzzled, Curly asked why he would be singled out. Chunkwei reminded him of the time when their sect leader had come to him, seeking help for an emotional imbalance he had been struggling with, guilt from years of battle. Curly had offered counsel as any good physician would, encouraging him to find peace and restraint. However, after the sessions, the leader became quiet and withdrawn, leading others to believe Curly had somehow changed him too profoundly. Now, with the leader still in isolation, rumors spread that Curly's influence was the cause. Because of this misunderstanding, the other halls considered him a danger to their group's stability. Back in the present, Curly finishes his story, telling Fugijia that this is why he can no longer return home. So, he plans to travel with them instead. He promises that if they ever need help, he'll be there. Then, noticing Fugijia's concern about his thinning hair, Curly smiles and offers some advice. He suggests that perhaps the issue isn't physical at all, but psychological, a stress-related barrier. He hands Fugijia the comb Sister Chunkwei gave him and says, "Use this every day. Even if you don't see hair yet, your mind will begin to believe it's growing. Once you break that inner barrier, your confidence will bring results. To regrow your hair, you must first overcome yourself." And so, the long story of seeking a hair growth formula filled with humor, misunderstandings, and human connections finally comes to a close. Although it may not have been a perfect journey, it was a meaningful one. When Fugijia finally returns to the Shaolin Temple, the chief monk greets him warmly and immediately mistakes Curly for the undercover agent he was supposed to bring back. At the same time, in the Jieshi Hall, once a proud branch of the unorthodox sect led by Curly, the hall now stands nearly empty. 2 remaining disciples linger in the quiet courtyard. The short-haired disciple asks if there's any word about their missing leader. The other, who has longer hair, shakes his head. Ever since their master disappeared, the Jieshi Hall has slowly fallen apart. The short-haired disciple suggests that if their top fighter, Brother Chiang, were here to lead them, victory would be easy. But his companion tells him Chiang can't return because he left to take the imperial examination on someone else's behalf and won't be back anytime soon. Disheartened, the short-haired disciple says their only hope now is to rely on numbers. If everyone joins together, they can still win. But the long-haired disciple shakes his head. Everyone else has already left. Only the 2 of them remain, and he has come to say goodbye. He admits he's not abandoning the hall out of disloyalty. His family wants him to leave the martial world, settle down, and get married. Some of his relatives even joke about whether martial artists eat enough each day. The short-haired disciple laughs bitterly, saying, "It depends on how much food one can afford." But his tone quickly shifts as he accuses his comrade of betraying their master, Curly. The long-haired disciple insists it's not betrayal. He wants a different life. The short-haired one, unable to contain his frustration, throws a punch in anger. The long-haired disciple swiftly dodges and counters with precision, demonstrating refined technique. He calmly explains that everyone knew his rival once came from the Shaolin Temple, so they had already studied ways to neutralize his moves. Curly himself had asked them to keep that secret to spare him the embarrassment. The short-haired disciple then recalls his past 3 years earlier. He had been a monk at the Shaolin Temple. Though skilled, he often felt unmotivated and lost. Hoping to find purpose, he set his sights on joining the Shaolin 8 Vajra, a position of great honor. One day, the chief monk informed him that there was indeed an opening, but instead, he had a more delicate mission to go undercover within the unorthodox sects. When he first joined the Geisha Hall, life felt repetitive and dull until he met Curly, the man who radiated confidence and warmth. Curly encouraged him to treat the hall as his home, and the disciples as his brothers. Moved by this, he gradually let go of his secret identity as an undercover monk and devoted himself entirely to the hall. Now, standing in the ruins of what remains, he resolves to uphold the spirit of the Geisha Hall, even without his leader. But when he looks around, his companion is already gone. Moments later, the long-haired disciple returns, holding a letter from Sir Curly himself. They open it together inside. Curly writes that he is currently at the Shaolin Temple and invites them to visit, saying the place is quite fascinating. The two disciples are speechless, realizing their master has joined the very temple they once opposed. The short-haired disciple asks his companion if he has decided to give up on marriage. The long-haired disciple replies that he hasn't given up at all. He wants to stay in the hall a little longer. His parents told him that as long as he settles down and marries locally, they won't pressure him to return home. Hearing this, the short-haired disciple beams with excitement, relieved that he won't have to feel lonely anymore. The long-haired disciple then opens a letter and holds it up with a grin. The message from headquarters states that if they can find a new hall leader, their branch will be allowed to continue. Together, they begin discussing the qualities their future leader should have. The short-haired disciple insists the person must be reliable and strong. The long-haired one agrees, but adds that their own low rank in the martial world makes it hard to judge others properly. As they think back to the influential figures they've met, the long-haired disciple suggests Lin Tang with his sharp swordsmanship and distinctive white hair. He looks every bit the part of a hallmaster. The short-haired disciple disagrees, saying Fugijia would be a better choice. His calm expression and solid build make him seem trustworthy. The long-haired one stares blankly, questioning his friend's unusual idea of leadership appeal, and mentions an old acquaintance, Dongliang Pi, who founded his own sect, but became distant after gaining power. Eventually, they realize that everyone they've named already belongs to another group. What they really need is someone who aligns with their ideals, but is free from sect ties, someone strong, reliable, and independent. After a long pause, both speak the same name at once, Brother Tianba. Filled with hope, the two rush to the official academy where Tianba now studies. When they finally find him, Tianba immediately guesses why they've come. With a calm smile, he declines their offer, explaining that he's focused on his studies and the upcoming imperial examinations. His days of roaming the martial world are over. The disciples stared in disbelief. The rumors were true. Tianba had really exchanged his sword for books. Tianba adds that he's not suited to leadership anyway. He once formed a small group of 3, but they disbanded after arguing over the name. Since then, he decided that leadership brings too much pressure. The two disciples sigh, feeling their hopes fade. Just then, a group of students bursts into the courtyard, shouting that the academy across the street is challenging them. Without hesitation, Tianba stands up, adjusts his sleeves, and says he'll handle it. As he strides away, the Jieshi Hall disciples watch in stunned silence. Earlier, while traveling together, the two disciples chatted to pass the time. The long-haired disciple recounts a recent blind date that felt more like an interrogation. For a moment, he thought she might be an undercover investigator. But in the end, he realized she wanted to know whether he owned a house. The short-haired disciple shakes his head in disbelief, saying, dating standards have genuinely changed. The long-haired disciple adds that his date had an accent from the Central Plains, and seemed to carry herself with a bit of pride. The short-haired disciple quickly responds that people from that region tend to underestimate martial artists. As they stop briefly at a busy harbor, he remarks that the crowd must be due to peak travel hours. Continuing their journey, the short-haired disciple turns the question back on him, asking if he actually owns a house. The long-haired one sighs. Houses have become far too expensive, and rents are climbing higher every year. Both admit they're struggling since they're near the bottom tier of the martial world hierarchy. The short-haired disciple agrees, saying life has been hard ever since he left the Shaolin Temple. They both daydream about going on the kind of thrilling adventures they read about in novels. For now, though, they remain unknown and unseen, quietly hoping for their turn to shine as they finally arrive in Jiangxin province. Their goal is to visit an old acquaintance, Brother Xiang. He was once the brightest mind in Jishi Hall and their best recommendation for future leadership. However, he was caught in an unfortunate incident during the imperial examinations and now spends his days under supervision. The two disciples come not to judge him, but to encourage him, believing that everyone deserves a second chance. Upon being allowed into the holding area, they find Chang sitting calmly and greet him warmly. The short-haired disciple jokes about whether he pays rent for his current quarters, to which Chang smiles faintly and shakes his head. They chat briefly about old times before Chang asks how the long-haired disciple performed in his own examination. He admits his score was terrible, joking that it was a blessing since the results were voided anyway. The short-haired disciple laughs, teasing that it serves him right for not studying properly, then hands over a few mock papers for practice. But Chang waves them away, saying he no longer plans to pursue the exams. Instead, he's made a new acquaintance, a man named Manhwa Park, who claims to be a descendant of a royal family from the previous dynasty. Manhwa has told him that his ancestors left behind hidden treasures, and that once he is free, he intends to start a grand business venture. The two disciples are instantly intrigued, whispering that maybe this is the adventure they've been waiting for. Still, the short-haired one hesitantly asks what exactly landed Manhwa in this place. Chang pauses and finally admits it was a financial deception case. As they leave, the short-haired disciple wonders aloud if they asked too many questions. He glances back at the quiet corridor and sighs, sensing that Chang seemed genuinely sad as they walked away. Our story ends here. Thank you for watching. Love Manhwa, subscribe, and be part of a family that lives every story together.